On June 4, 1942, the United States Navy was outnumbered, outgunned, and about to fight the most important battle of the Pacific War. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers approached Midway Island with orders to destroy the American fleet and secure Japan's dominance across the ocean. The Americans knew they were coming, not because of reconnaissance aircraft or lucky patrols. They knew because they had read Japan's orders before Japanese captains received them. In a basement in Hawaii, a team of codebreakers had cracked Japan's naval cipher. They knew where the attack would come, when it would arrive, and which ships Japan would commit. Admiral Chester Nimitz positioned his carriers for an ambush. When Japanese aircraft were refueling on crowded flight decks, American dive bombers attacked. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were burning wrecks. Japan's offensive capability was shattered. The tide of the Pacific War turned because intelligence had given America the ultimate advantage: perfect foreknowledge. Midway was not unique. Across the Atlantic, British cryptanalysts were reading German U-boat orders and routing convoys around submarine wolf packs, preventing Britain's starvation. In Moscow, Soviet intelligence confirmed that Japan would not attack Siberia, allowing Stalin to transfer divisions that saved the capital. In occupied France, a Spanish double agent was feeding lies to German intelligence, convincing Hitler that the D-Day invasion would strike hundreds of miles from the actual beaches. World War II was fought not only with tanks, ships, and aircraft, but with information. Spies, codebreakers, and intelligence officers waged a secret war that decided battles before soldiers fired a shot. Some nations excelled at this invisible conflict. Others failed catastrophically. The difference determined whether fleets were ambushed or victorious, whether cities starved or survived, whether nations collapsed or endured. Which country had the most effective spies of World War II? The answer shaped the outcome of the war itself. The industrial scale of secret warfare. World War II was not won solely by tanks, planes, and infantry. Beneath the visible battles, an invisible war raged, a war fought by mathematicians, linguists, radio engineers, and agents operating in enemy capitals. Information became a weapon capable of sinking fleets, turning campaigns, and deceiving entire armies. This was espionage on an industrial scale. Intelligence agencies employed thousands. Code-breaking facilities processed millions of intercepted messages. Networks of agents spanned continents. The question is, which nation wielded this weapon most effectively? To answer that, we need clear measures. We'll evaluate 4 major contenders: Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States, and Germany, using 3 criteria. First, strategic impact. Did intelligence directly change the outcome of major battles or campaigns? We're looking for straight lines, from intelligence to battlefield victory cases, where commanders won because they knew what the enemy would do. Second, network penetration and collection quality. How deeply did each nation reach into enemy command structures? This covers both human intelligence agents in ministries and headquarters and signals intelligence, the breaking of encrypted communications. Third, counterintelligence and security. How well did each nation protect its own secrets? Could they neutralize enemy spies or turn captured agents into weapons of disinformation? Before we examine the 4 main contenders, we must acknowledge the foundation that made Allied success possible, a foundation built in Warsaw. The Polish gift that changed everything. July 1939. German tanks sat poised on Poland's border. Invasion was weeks away. In this desperate moment, Polish cryptographers made a decision that would alter the course of the war. For nearly a decade, the Polish Cipher Bureau had worked on a problem British and French experts considered unsolvable: the German Enigma machine. This encryption device produced ciphers so complex that the Germans believed them unbreakable. Wehrmacht commanders sent orders over the radio in complete confidence that no enemy could read them. They were wrong. In the early 1930s, a Polish mathematician named Marian Rejewski achieved what others thought impossible. He reverse-engineered Enigma's internal wiring through mathematical analysis. The Poles built their own replica machines. They developed techniques to decrypt German military traffic. For years, they read Wehrmacht communications in secret. As Germany prepared to invade, the Polish Cipher Bureau faced a choice. They could take their research underground, hoping to continue operations after the occupation, or they could give everything to their allies, trusting that Britain and France would carry the work forward. On July 25, 1939, Polish, British, and French intelligence officers met in the Pirie Forest outside Warsaw. The Poles revealed their breakthrough. They handed over all their research, techniques, and 2 functioning Enigma replicas. 5 weeks later, German forces crossed the border. Poland fell in 27 days. But the gift survived. British cryptographers received the Polish work and transported it to a country estate 50 miles north of London, a place called Bletchley Park. Every subsequent Allied success in breaking German codes traced back to this moment. The Polish contribution was not a footnote. It was the foundation. This act reveals something essential about intelligence warfare. It rewards collaboration, not isolation. The Poles understood that their breakthrough was too valuable to die with them. Britain understood that accepting help from an ally was a strength, not a weakness. When we examine Germany's intelligence efforts, we'll see the opposite: an apparatus poisoned by rivalry and mistrust that destroyed itself from within. The Polish gift made Allied code-breaking possible. Now we can examine how each nation used or failed to use the advantages of intelligence provided. Britain, the battle winners. Britain entered the war as an experienced intelligence power. The empire had run spy networks for centuries, but World War II demanded something new, an integration of traditional spycraft with technological innovation on an unprecedented scale. Britain built that system, and it worked, breaking Enigma and the birth of Ultra. The Polish gift arrived at Bletchley Park in August 1939. British mathematicians, including Alan Turing, took the foundation and industrialized it. They didn't just decrypt individual messages, they built machines to process German traffic at scale. The Germans believed Enigma was unbreakable because of its astronomical number of possible settings. Each 3-rotor Enigma had over 159 quintillion possible configurations. The Germans thought this made decryption impossible within any useful time frame. Bletchley Park proved them wrong. Turing and his colleagues built electromechanical devices called bombs that could test thousands of settings per minute, exploiting weaknesses in German operating procedures. The Germans made mistakes, repeated phrases, predictable message openings, lazy cipher discipline. When a weather station began every report with the same phrase, that became a crib, known plaintext, that could unlock the day's settings. The bombs were mechanical marvels. Banks of rotating drums simulated Enigma rotors, testing setting after setting until they found a match. When a bomb stopped, cryptanalysts had a potential solution. They tested it against intercepted messages. If it worked, they had broken that day's key and could read all traffic using those settings. Later, they broke an even more complex cipher called Tunny, used by the German High Command for strategic communications. The resulting intelligence was codenamed Ultra. For most of the war, Allied commanders could read German orders, troop movements, and supply reports, often within hours of transmission. The Battle of the Atlantic. The Atlantic was Britain's lifeline. Convoys carried food, fuel, and munitions from North America. German U-boats hunted those convoys, trying to starve Britain into submission. In the early war, U-boats were devastatingly effective. The Kriegsmarine's B-Dienst had broken British naval codes, allowing German commanders to vector submarines onto convoy routes with precision. During the first happy time of 1940 and 1941, German wolf packs sank hundreds of merchant ships. Britain's food reserves dropped to dangerous levels. Then Ultra changed the equation. By mid-1941, Bletchley Park was reading German naval Enigma. British naval intelligence could see where U-boat patrol lines were forming. The submarine tracking room at the Admiralty used this intelligence to plot U-boat positions on massive wall charts. When a convoy was scheduled to cross the Atlantic, routing officers drew courses that avoided known submarine concentrations. Ships that would have been torpedoed sailed past U-boats waiting in the empty ocean. German submarine commanders radioed increasingly frustrated reports of failed patrols entire weeks without sighting a single merchant vessel. Between 1941 and 1943, the Royal Navy and RAF also used Ultra to hunt submarines directing escort vessels and aircraft to U-boat positions. By May 1943, Admiral Dönitz withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic after losing 41 boats in a single month. He didn't know his communications had been compromised. He thought the Allies had developed revolutionary detection technology. Ultra had won the Battle of the Atlantic. Without this victory, Britain would have faced starvation, and the American build-up for D-Day would have been impossible. The submarine tracking room at the Admiralty became the nerve center of the Atlantic battle. Officers plotted U-boat positions on massive wall charts covering entire walls. Colored pins represented submarines, red for confirmed positions, yellow for probable locations. When a convoy was scheduled to cross the Atlantic, routing officers examined the chart and drew courses that avoided known submarine concentrations. Sometimes this meant adding hundreds of miles to a voyage, but ships reached port safely. German submarine commanders radioed increasingly frustrated reports of failed patrols entire weeks without sighting a single merchant vessel. They couldn't understand why the convoys had vanished. North Africa and El Alamein. In 1942, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps drove British forces back toward Egypt, but Ultra gave the British a decisive advantage. Bletchley Park decrypted German reports on fuel supplies, ammunition stocks, and planned offensives. The Royal Navy and RAF used this intelligence to sink Axis supply ships before they reached North African ports. Rommel's supply situation became desperate. His tanks sat immobile for lack of fuel. His artillery rationed shells. Ultra revealed all of this to British commanders in real time. At the Second Battle of El Alamein in October and November 1942, General Bernard Montgomery had a complete picture of German dispositions, strengths, and weaknesses. He knew which sectors were lightly defended and where German reserves were positioned. Rommel was fighting blind while Montgomery knew everything. The Eighth Army broke through and drove Rommel's forces westward in a retreat that didn't stop until Tunisia. Ultra-intelligence had turned the desert fox into prey. Rommel's tactical skill couldn't compensate for the fact that his enemy could read his supply reports and operational orders. The Battle of Cape Matapan. In March 1941, Ultra intercepts revealed an Italian Navy sortie into the eastern Mediterranean to attack British convoys. Admiral Andrew Cunningham set a trap. On the night of March 28th, British battleships surprised the Italian fleet. Radar fire control, a technology the Italians lacked, allowed British gunners to hit targets they couldn't see. The Royal Navy sank 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers without losing any capital ships. The Italian Navy never again challenged British dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. D-Day and Operation Fortitude. The Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, succeeded partly because German commanders were looking in the wrong direction. Operation Fortitude was designed to convince the Germans that the main invasion would strike Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. The Allies created a phantom army in southeast England under General Patton's command. They built fake landing craft and inflatable tanks. But the critical element was the double agents controlled by MI5, who filed reports describing the Phantom Army's preparations. Ultra confirmed the deception was working. Bletchley Park decrypted German assessments showing that Hitler believed Calais was the real target. German intelligence reports, filed by the double agents and accepted as genuine, reinforced this belief. Even after Allied forces landed at Normandy, German commanders kept powerful panzer divisions at Calais for weeks, waiting for the real invasion. Those divisions arrived too late to affect the outcome. Ultra hadn't just provided information, it had verified that German intelligence had swallowed the lie completely. The double-cross system, Britain's counterintelligence triumph, was as remarkable as its code-breaking success. When Germany sent agents to Britain, MI5 caught every single one. Germany dispatched approximately 200 agents to Britain between 1939 and 1945. All were captured, surrendered, or killed. Most were identified within hours or days. Some had implausible cover stories. Others were caught by coastal patrols or betrayed by ultra-decrypts revealing their missions. Many simply surrendered upon arrival, having been coerced into service with no loyalty to Germany. MI5 didn't just capture these agents, they turned them. The double-cross system, run by the 20 Committee, used German spies to feed disinformation back to Berlin. When suitable, captured agents were offered a choice: cooperation or prosecution. Most cooperated. The process was meticulous. MI5 continued the agent's radio communications with Germany, pretending the spy was operating freely. Messages were carefully crafted to maintain credibility, a mix of accurate but useless information and carefully designed lies. The most successful was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo. He fabricated an entire network of fictional sub-agents across Britain, 27 imaginary people with detailed backstories. German handlers believed all of them were real. Garbo submitted expense reports for travel and bribes. The Abwehr reimbursed him without question. When Operation Fortitude required selling the Calais deception, Garbo delivered. He told his German handlers about Patton's Phantom Army. After D-Day, he convinced them that Normandy was a diversion and the real invasion was still coming at Calais. German commanders believed him. Panzer divisions stayed at Calais, while the Normandy beachhead was consolidated. German intelligence awarded Garbo the Iron Cross. Britain awarded him the Member of the Order of the British Empire. He remains the only person to have received decorations from both sides in World War II. The double-cross system represented total counterintelligence success. Britain weaponized Germany's intelligence service without Berlin knowing. By 1943, German intelligence had no independent sources in Britain. Everything they knew came from agents controlled by MI5. The process was meticulous. When an agent was captured, MI5 interrogators assessed whether the person could be turned. Were they genuinely anti-Nazi? Could they be trusted? Did their cover story make them credible to German handlers? MI5 then continued the agent's radio communications with Germany, pretending the spy was operating freely. Messages were carefully crafted, a mix of accurate but useless information and carefully designed lies. Garbo fabricated an entire network of fictional sub-agents, 27 imaginary people with detailed backstories. There was a Venezuelan student in Glasgow, a Portuguese commercial traveler in Cardiff. German handlers believed all of them were real. Garbo submitted expense reports for travel and bribes. The Abwehr reimbursed him without question. The Cambridge Five. Britain's intelligence record against Germany was near perfect. Against the Soviet Union, it was catastrophic. 5 British men, Kim Philby, Donald Maclean, Guy Burgess, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross, were recruited by Soviet intelligence in the 1930s while at Cambridge University. All were communists who believed the Soviet Union represented humanity's future. All rose to positions of significant access within British intelligence and government. Philby became head of MI6's anti-Soviet section. Maclean worked in the Foreign Office with access to diplomatic cables. Burgess moved between MI6 and the BBC. Blunt worked in MI5. Cairncross had access to ultra-decrypts at Bletchley Park. For years, they fed British secrets to Moscow information on Allied strategy, military plans, atomic research, and intelligence operations. During the war, their most significant impact was giving Stalin insight into Allied intentions. Cairncross passed ultra-intelligence to Moscow, helping Soviet commanders on the Eastern Front. The 5 weren't exposed until years later. This penetration was a massive counterintelligence failure. MI5 and MI6, so effective at catching German agents, never suspected their own officers were working for Moscow. Britain's verdict. On strategic impact, Britain's record is exceptional. Ultra won the Battle of the Atlantic, enabled victory in North Africa, facilitated the Cape Matapan ambush, and confirmed D-Day deception was working. The double-cross system turned Germany's spy network into a weapon of Allied deception. On network penetration, Britain achieved total visibility into German military communications through code-breaking. This was better than having spies in headquarters they read the actual orders. On counterintelligence, Britain's performance against Germany was flawless. Every German agent was caught and turned. Against the Soviet Union, Britain failed the Cambridge Five, operated undetected throughout the war. The Cambridge Five matter, especially for post-war intelligence. But during the war itself, Britain's primary enemy was Germany. Against Germany, British intelligence delivered a sustained advantage across every major theatre. The Polish Foundation, Bletchley Park's genius, and MI5's cunning created a system that won battles. The Soviet Union, the human intelligence masters. Soviet espionage specialized in human intelligence. They recruited agents who believed in communism as an ideological cause, true believers willing to betray their countries because they thought they were serving a higher purpose. That ideological motivation gave Soviet intelligence access that no amount of money could buy, and they used it to penetrate not just their enemies, but their allies. Richard Sorge and the defense of Moscow. In 1933, Soviet military intelligence sent Richard Sorge to Japan. He posed as a loyal Nazi journalist. The German ambassador to Tokyo, Eugen Ott, became his close friend. Sorge's position gave him extraordinary access to Japanese and German plans, which he radioed to Moscow using a clandestine transmitter. In 1941, Sorge provided two pieces of information that altered the war's course. First, he warned Moscow of the exact date of Operation Barbarossa, Germany's invasion. Late June 1941. He was correct. German forces crossed the border on June 22nd. Stalin ignored the warning, convinced it was British disinformation. This refusal would cost millions of Soviet lives. But Sorge's second report changed everything. In September and October 1941, as German forces closed on Moscow, Sorge confirmed that Japan would not attack the Soviet Union. Japanese leadership had decided to strike south against the United States, not north into Siberia. Stalin trusted this intelligence. He ordered the transfer of elite Siberian divisions westward, roughly 30 divisions, more than 250,000 troops. These veteran soldiers, equipped for winter warfare, arrived in late November and early December, just as German forces reached Moscow's outskirts. The temperature dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. The Wehrmacht, exhausted and unprepared for winter, stalled. The Siberian divisions counterattacked. The Battle of Moscow was the first major German defeat of the war. Without Sorge's intelligence, Stalin could not have risked moving those troops. If Japan had invaded Siberia while the Red Army fought for Moscow, the Soviet Union might have faced a two-front war it could not survive. Sorge's confirmation allowed Stalin to concentrate all forces against Germany at the critical moment. Sorge was arrested by Japanese police in October 1941 and hanged in November 1944, but his intelligence had already saved Moscow. Sorge's position gave him extraordinary access. The German ambassador, Eugen Ott, became his close friend and confidant. Ott trusted Sorge completely, viewing him as a fellow German patriot. Sorge became a frequent visitor to the German embassy, where he had access to classified cables and intelligence summaries. Ott spoke freely about strategic assessments. From his Japanese contacts in government and military circles, Sorge learned about Tokyo's strategic deliberations, the debates over whether to strike north against the Soviet Union or south against British and American territories. He radioed all of this to Moscow using a clandestine transmitter. Stalin trusted Sergei's second report. He ordered the immediate transfer of elite Siberian divisions westward, roughly 30 divisions, more than 250,000 troops. They arrived in late November and early December, just as German forces reached Moscow's outskirts. Fresh and equipped for winter, they counterattacked and drove German forces back. The Lucy Ring and the Battle of Kursk. Soviet intelligence also ran the Lucy Ring from neutral Switzerland, coordinated by Rudolf Rossler, a German émigré who somehow obtained access to German high command intelligence. The sources remain debated contacts inside the Wehrmacht, or British intelligence feeding Ultra through Rossler. Regardless, the intelligence was extraordinarily accurate. In 1943, this became critical. After Stalingrad, Germany planned a massive offensive to regain initiative, Operation Citadel, targeting the Soviet salient around Kursk. Germany concentrated nearly 3,000 tanks, including new Tigers and Panthers, to encircle and destroy Soviet forces. Soviet intelligence from Lucy Ring, the Red Orchestra inside Germany, and other sources provided a detailed warning. Soviet commanders knew the attack was coming, where it would strike, and when. Marshal Zhukov used this intelligence to prepare Kursk as a killing ground, layered defensive belts with trenches, bunkers, anti-tank obstacles, minefields, and positioned reserves. When German forces attacked on July 5, 1943, they advanced into prepared defenses. Every kilometer was savagely contested. Soviet anti-tank guns destroyed German armor. After 2 weeks of brutal fighting, German forces had penetrated only a few kilometers at catastrophic cost. The Red Army counterattacked on July 12, driving German forces back. Kursk was the last major German offensive on the Eastern Front. Soviet intelligence had given commanders the gift of foreknowledge, allowing preparation that turned the battlefield into a trap. The Red Orchestra. The Red Orchestra was a collection of anti-fascist resistance groups across Germany and occupied Europe, coordinated by Soviet intelligence. Members included German communists, civil servants, military officers, and intellectuals opposed to Hitler. They collected information on Wehrmacht operations, war production, and strategic planning. German counterintelligence eventually infiltrated the networks through radio direction finding and brutal interrogation. Between 1942 and 1943, hundreds were arrested and most executed. But before their destruction, Red Orchestra agents provided valuable intelligence that contributed to Soviet preparations for operations like Kursk. The Cambridge Five revisited. From Moscow's viewpoint, the Cambridge Five was perhaps the greatest human intelligence success of the 20th century. Kim Philby, Donald Maclean, Guy Burgess, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross gave Soviet intelligence direct access to British strategic thinking, intelligence operations, military planning, and atomic research. All were ideological recruits, communists serving what they saw as a higher cause. Philby's position as head of MI6's anti-Soviet section was extraordinarily valuable. He knew which Soviet operations British intelligence had detected and could warn Moscow when agents or networks were compromised. He sabotaged British operations against the USSR. Maclean provided insights into Allied strategy and post-war planning. Cairncross passed ultra-decrypts to Moscow, giving Soviet commanders intelligence from British codebreaking. Blunt provided information on counterintelligence operations. Burgess provided political analysis. This penetration continued through the Cold War, shaping Soviet strategy for decades and compromising Western operations. The Five demonstrated the power of ideological recruitment, true believers who took extraordinary risks for years without material reward. Atomic espionage. Soviet intelligence also targeted the Manhattan Project with extraordinary success. Multiple agents penetrated the project at different levels. Klaus Fuchs, a German-born British physicist at Los Alamos, provided detailed technical information on bomb design, including the implosion mechanism, mathematical calculations, and engineering diagrams. Theodore Hall, an American physicist at Los Alamos, independently provided similar information, believing a Soviet bomb would prevent American nuclear monopoly. David Greenglass passed information to Julius Rosenberg. Other agents collected intelligence from multiple Manhattan Project sites. The intelligence was comprehensive. Soviet physicists received blueprints, calculations, and production techniques. This dramatically accelerated the Soviet nuclear program. American intelligence estimated the USSR wouldn't have a bomb until the mid-1950s. Instead, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic device on August 29, 1949, only 4 years after Hiroshima. This strategic intelligence victory fundamentally shaped the Cold War balance of power, the arms race, and international relations for decades. The unforgivable failure. Operation Barbarossa. Soviet intelligence collected information brilliantly, but the most important intelligence of the war was ignored. In the months before June 1941, Soviet intelligence provided repeated, detailed warnings about Operation Barbarossa. Richard Sorge reported Germany would attack in late June. The Lucy Ring warned of German troop concentrations along the border. The Red Orchestra reported Wehrmacht preparations. Soviet military intelligence observed German reconnaissance flights and forward deployment. Even some German officers opposed to Hitler tried to warn Moscow through neutral countries. The warnings came from multiple independent sources, all reporting the same information. Germany would attack in June 1941. Stalin dismissed them all. He believed the warnings were British disinformation designed to provoke a Soviet-German war. He thought Hitler would not attack while still fighting Britain. He believed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact gave him time. He feared that any defensive preparations might provoke Hitler by appearing aggressive. All of this was catastrophically wrong. Hitler had decided to invade regardless of strategic logic. Nazi ideology demanded the conquest of Lebensraum in the East and the destruction of Bolshevism. On June 22, 1941, at 03:15 hours, 3 million German troops crossed the Soviet border. The Red Army, unprepared and poorly positioned, suffered catastrophic losses. In the first months, the Soviets lost millions of soldiers, thousands of aircraft and tanks, and vast territories. By November, German forces had surrounded Leningrad and reached Moscow's outskirts. The Soviet Union came closer to complete collapse than any other major power. The human cost was staggering, millions dead in the first 6 months. The industrial heartland of the Western USSR was occupied or destroyed. The intelligence had been perfect. Multiple independent sources confirmed the same information with remarkable consistency. Stalin's intelligence agencies did their job. The failure was Stalin's alone. His paranoia and misreading of Hitler's intentions produced a catastrophic refusal to act on accurate intelligence. Stalin's intelligence agencies had done their job with exceptional competence. Soviet intelligence officers had risked their lives to gather accurate information. Analysts had correctly interpreted the data and warned leadership repeatedly. The contrast with other leaders is stark. Admiral Nimitz trusted Rochefort's code-breaking and won at Midway. Montgomery trusted Ultra and won at El Alamein. These commanders understood that intelligence must be acted upon decisively. Stalin did the opposite. He had intelligence better than any other wartime leader received about the most critical threat. He ignored it, because it didn't fit his worldview. The cost was nearly terminal. After Barbarossa, Stalin learned. He trusted Sorge about Japan and transferred the Siberian divisions. He trusted intelligence about Kursk and prepared accordingly. But the initial failure was so massive and its consequences so devastating that it defines the Soviet intelligence experience of World War II. Soviet intelligence gathering was brilliant. Soviet intelligence utilization at the most critical moment was catastrophic. Soviet verdict: on network penetration, Soviet intelligence was unmatched. No nation achieved simultaneous penetration of the enemy high command, Allied intelligence services, and Allied strategic research at this level. Sorge, Lucy Ring, Red Orchestra, Cambridge 5, and atomic spies created a global network of exceptional depth. On strategic impact, Soviet HUMINT had direct battle-winning effects. Sorge's intelligence enabled Moscow's defense. Lucy Ring and Red Orchestra intelligence contributed to the Kursk victory. Atomic espionage shaped the post-war world. On counterintelligence, the record is mixed. Stalin's great purges of the late 1930s weakened Soviet intelligence. Soviet counterintelligence focused on executing enemy agents rather than turning them. But the Barbarossa failure overshadows everything. Soviet intelligence provided Stalin with perfect information from multiple sources about the most critical threat. He refused to believe it. No intelligence apparatus can be ranked first when its leader ignores perfect information and nearly loses the war as a result. The United States. From Pearl Harbor to Midway. The United States entered World War II with no centralized intelligence agency. Army and Navy intelligence operated independently with little coordination. The learning curve would be steep, beginning with disaster. December 7, 1941. In 1940, American cryptanalysts broke Japan's highest-level diplomatic cipher, codenamed Purple. This gave American intelligence access to Tokyo's diplomatic traffic. By late 1941, intercepted messages painted a clear picture. Japan was preparing for war. Diplomatic relations had deteriorated over American embargoes on oil and steel. Japanese diplomats presented ultimatums. Messages referred to deadlines and final decisions. On December 6, 1941, American cryptanalysts decoded a 13-part message: Japan's final rejection of U.S. positions. The 14th part, decoded early on December 7th, instructed the embassy to present the message at exactly 1 p.m. Washington time, 7:30 a.m. in Hawaii. The failure was not in the collection. Purple was broken, messages were decoded, the intelligence was available. The failure was analytical and organizational. Army and Navy intelligence didn't coordinate effectively. Each service guarded information jealously. Analysts suffered from failure of imagination. They assumed Japan would attack British or Dutch possessions in Southeast Asia, not Pearl Harbor, 3,000 miles across the open ocean. Intelligence was not distributed to commanders in Hawaii who needed it. On the morning of December 7th, radar operators detected a large formation approaching from the north. A junior officer, assuming it was American B-17 bombers expected from California, told them not to worry. At 7:48 a.m., Japanese carrier aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. Torpedoes and bombs struck battleships moored along Ford Island. Arizona exploded when a bomb detonated her forward magazine, killing over 1,000 men. Oklahoma capsized. The attack continued for nearly 2 hours. 8 battleships were sunk or heavily damaged. 188 aircraft were destroyed. 2,400 Americans were dead. Over 1,000 were wounded. This was the worst intelligence failure in American history. The information existed, but was not analyzed correctly, not shared effectively, and not acted upon. 2,400 people died because the intelligence system failed at every stage except collection. The failure was analytical and organizational, a cascading series of breakdowns. Army and Navy intelligence did not coordinate effectively. Each service operated independently and guarded information jealously. The Army and Navy were rivals competing for budget and prestige. This rivalry infected intelligence operations. Information was shared reluctantly and often too late. Analysts suffered from a failure of imagination. American intelligence assessed that Japan would attack British or Dutch possessions in Southeast Asia, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies. These territories held the resources Japan needed. But Hawaii? Pearl Harbor was over 3,500 miles from Japan. Analysts didn't believe Japan would risk a carrier strike that far from home waters. This was mirror imaging, assuming the enemy would make decisions similar to American planners. American naval doctrine emphasized caution and preservation of capital ships. Therefore, analysts assumed Japan would not take such risks. This was a failure to understand Japanese strategic culture, which emphasized offensive strikes and knockout blows. The institutional response. And magic. Pearl Harbor forced institutional reform. Intelligence coordination improved drastically. The Army and Navy began sharing information more effectively, recognizing that rivalry had contributed to disaster. Resources flowed to cryptanalysis. In June 1942, President Roosevelt established the Office of Strategic Services under William Wild Bill Donovan, America's first centralized intelligence agency. Cryptanalysts turned their focus to Japanese military codes, particularly JN-25. By early 1942, Station Hypo in Hawaii, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, was making progress against the Imperial Navy's operational cipher. The intelligence was codenamed Magic. The Battle of Midway. By May 1942, Station Hypo was reading enough Japanese naval traffic to understand operational patterns. Magic revealed Japan was planning a major operation. Multiple intercepts referred to a target designated AF. Rochefort believed AF was Midway Island, a strategic atoll northwest of Hawaii. To confirm, he had Midway's garrison send a plain language message reporting their water distillation equipment had broken down. Days later, American cryptanalysts decoded a Japanese message stating AF was short of fresh water. AF was confirmed as Midway. Rochefort's team also provided details. Admiral Yamamoto was committing 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, along with battleships and cruisers. The attack would come in early June. Admiral Chester Nimitz faced a decision. Intelligence officers in Washington were skeptical. They thought AF might be elsewhere. But Nimitz trusted Rochefort and Station Hypo. He sent 3 American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, to positions northeast of Midway for an ambush. On June 4, 1942, the trap was sprung. Japanese carriers launched their first strike against Midway. Admiral Nagumo then ordered his aircraft prepared for a second strike. At that moment, Japanese scouts reported American carriers in the area, a complete surprise. Nagumo ordered ordnance switched from land attack bombs to torpedoes. Crews worked frantically, flight decks filled with armed and fueled aircraft. American dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown arrived at that exact moment. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey saw the Japanese carriers' vulnerable decks packed with aircraft, ordnance exposed, no fighters overhead to defend them. His squadron attacked. Bombs struck 3 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, igniting fuel and detonating ordnance. All 3 were destroyed. The 4th carrier, Hiryu, was found and destroyed later that day. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and many experienced pilots in one day. The United States lost Yorktown and approximately 150 aircraft. The Battle of Midway was the Pacific War's turning point. Japan never recovered. The US went on the offensive. Midway was won by intelligence. Rochefort's code-breaking gave Nimitz the information needed to position carriers for a perfect ambush. This is the clearest example in history of signals intelligence directly winning a major battle. After Midway, Rochefort expected recognition. Instead, he was reassigned due to rivalries within Navy intelligence. Officers in Washington resented Station Hypo's success and Rochefort's independent methods. Years later, he was finally recognized with awards. But the shabby treatment of the man who won Midway remains a stain on the Navy's record. The failure was analytical and organizational, a cascading series of breakdowns. Army and Navy intelligence did not coordinate effectively. Each service operated independently and guarded information jealously. The Army and Navy were rivals competing for budget and prestige. This rivalry infected intelligence operations. Information was shared reluctantly and often too late. Analysts suffered from a failure of imagination. American intelligence assessed that Japan would attack British or Dutch possessions in Southeast Asia, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. These territories held the resources Japan needed. But Hawaii? Pearl Harbor was over 3,500 miles from Japan. Analysts didn't believe Japan would risk a carrier strike that far from home waters. This was mirror imaging, assuming the enemy would make decisions similar to American planners. American naval doctrine emphasized caution and preservation of capital ships. Therefore, analysts assumed Japan would not take such risks. This was a failure to understand Japanese strategic culture, which emphasized offensive strikes and knockout blows. Operation Vengeance. Magic continued providing decisive intelligence. In April 1943, American cryptanalysts intercepted Admiral Yamamoto's exact flight itinerary. He would fly to the Solomon Islands with precise timing and aircraft type. Admiral Nimitz authorized an intercept mission. 18 P-38 fighters flew from Guadalcanal. On April 18th, they found Yamamoto's flight and shot down both Japanese bombers. Yamamoto was killed, a devastating blow to Japanese morale and leadership. Magic had enabled a surgical strike against enemy leadership, the Office of Strategic Services. The OSS, established in June 1942, was tasked with espionage, sabotage, analysis, and resistance support. It was new and learning, but it pioneered modern special operations. Jedburgh teams 3-man units of American, British, and French operatives parachuted into occupied France ahead of D-Day. They armed and coordinated French resistance groups, disrupting German communications and delaying reinforcements. The 2nd SS Panzer Division took 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken 3 days. Resistance attacks, coordinated by Jedburgh teams, delayed German reinforcements at the critical moment. The OSS also provided economic intelligence, analyzing Allied bombing impact on German war production. After the war, the OSS was dissolved, but its personnel and methods were absorbed into the Central Intelligence Agency, established in 1947. The OSS laid the foundation for modern American intelligence. The Soviet problem. Atomic espionage. Despite Magic's successes, American counterintelligence had serious vulnerabilities. Soviet agents successfully penetrated the Manhattan Project. Klaus Fuchs, a German-born British physicist at Los Alamos, passed detailed technical information to Soviet intelligence designs for the plutonium implosion weapon, calculations, and diagrams. Theodore Hall, an American physicist at Los Alamos, independently provided similar information, believing a Soviet bomb would prevent American nuclear monopoly. David Greenglass passed information to Julius Rosenberg. Other agents collected intelligence from multiple Manhattan Project sites. Soviet physicists received comprehensive intelligence that dramatically accelerated their nuclear program. American intelligence estimated the USSR wouldn't have a bomb until the mid-1950s. Instead, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic device on August 29, 1949, only 4 years after Hiroshima. This was a massive counterintelligence failure. The Manhattan Project was America's most sensitive program. Multiple Soviet agents penetrated it at various levels, stealing secrets that fundamentally shaped the Cold War balance of power and launched the nuclear arms race. American verdict. On strategic impact, the U.S. record is strong despite a catastrophic beginning. Pearl Harbor was inexcusable. 2,400 people died because the intelligence system failed. But Magic's impact in the Pacific was war-winning. Midway, Operation Vengeance, and sustained intelligence throughout the Pacific shortened the conflict and saved American lives. The OSS laid the foundations for modern American intelligence. On network penetration, the U.S. achieved excellent signals intelligence against Japan. Breaking JN-25 gave visibility into Japanese naval operations at the highest level. Human intelligence was weaker. The OSS was new and still developing its networks and tradecraft. On counterintelligence, the United States failed badly. Soviet penetration of the Manhattan Project was a security disaster with consequences that lasted decades. American counterintelligence was unprepared to defend against an Allied intelligence service conducting espionage on U.S. soil. The American arc is a catastrophe, followed by rapid learning and excellence. The U.S. proved intelligence capabilities can be built quickly when necessity demands it. The transformation from Pearl Harbor disaster to Midway triumph took only 6 months, a remarkable organizational achievement. But Pearl Harbor's 2,400 dead and the Soviet theft of atomic secrets were failures on a scale that prevents a higher ranking.